Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you this morning. Thank you for joining us for the Managing Director's press conference on her global policy agenda. As usual, we will begin with some opening remarks from the Managing Director, and then we will turn to your questions. So, Kristalina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So good to see you, bright and early. As always, we meet to reflect on the global policy agenda that we present to our members. And this year is not an exception, so here it is. I want to start, though, this time from you, to recognize the important work you do in a world that is unfortunately marked by turbulence and war. Breaks my heart to see the conflicts in the Middle East, in Ukraine, around the world, and I only can imagine what it is for the people who live in these zones of conflict. And then when I was coming for this press conference, I realized that many of your colleagues covered these events. They're there. So thank you for your hugely important work, and thank you for being today with us, with Julie and me. As you saw on Tuesday, when we released our latest World Economic Outlook, the global economy has held up remarkably well. Inflation continues to decline thanks to the concerted efforts of central banks, and also thanks to the ease in supply chain performance. Growth remained in positive territory, and interest rates are going down. For most of the world, soft landing is in sight. But people are not feeling good about their economic prospects. Everybody I ask here, how is your economy? The answer is good. How is the mood of your people? The answer is not so good. Families are still hurting from high prices, and global growth is anemic. We expect the global economy to grow by 3.2% this year and slow to 3.1% annual growth in 5 years. This is the lowest medium-term outlook in decades. And trade is no more a powerful engine of growth. We live in a more fragmented global economy. Meanwhile, public debt is on track to surpass $100 trillion this year, an all-time high, an equivalent to 93% of global GDP. By 2030, we expect that figure to approach 100% of GDP. So here is the bottom line. The global economy is in danger of getting stuck on a low-growth, high-debt path. That means lower incomes and fewer jobs. It also means lower government revenues, so less investment to support families and fight long-term challenges like climate change. These are anxious times. With these problems in mind, we have just published our latest global policy agenda. Here it is one more time if you haven't seen it the first time around. And it is very straightforward. It focuses on two priorities: secure the soft landing and break out of the low-growth, high-debt path. How can we do this? First, ensure that inflation gets back to target everywhere. Major central banks, including in the US, have rightly embarked on an easing path. The trick now is to finish the job on inflation without unnecessarily damaging the job market. Second, now is the time to act on debt and deficits. After years of much-needed fiscal support in response to shocks, now is the time to rebuild fiscal buffers. In most countries, that can be done gradually, but it needs to start now. Third and most important, it is crucial that countries carry out pro-growth reforms. From cutting red tape to improving governance, we have seen reforms being a source of significant benefits across countries. Our analysis shows that these reforms can boost output by up to 8% over 4 years in developing countries. As we tackle these challenges, it is also essential that we continue to cooperate on climate, technology, debt, trade. Climate change and technology are unleashing transformations to the global economy that require global response. Only by working together can we seize the opportunities and mitigate the risks of these great changes. On debt, we are making progress under the G20 Common Framework to speed up debt restructurings. The Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable that met yesterday is helping to make the process more predictable and efficient. But we need to do more to help countries in debt distress get back on their feet faster. Many of our members still face high interest rates and high debt servicing costs. Not unsustainable debt, but significant liquidity problems. And this is why, jointly with the World Bank, we are proposing a three-pillar response, combining reforms to boost growth and mobilize domestic resources, adequate financing, including from international financial institutions, and crowding in private finance. And finally, on trade, it is important to protect the gains from economic integration while ensuring they are widely shared. We know that globalization has not delivered for everyone, and we must attend to the needs of those who have lost out. And at the same time, we must ensure that trade remains an engine of global growth, especially for developing countries. They have so much more to lose if we fracture the global economy. At the IMF, we are, as always, deeply committed to serving our members so they navigate these challenging times. We will do so through our analysis and policy advice. It helps policymakers to understand the costs and benefits of policy choices, and we will continue to use our financial resources to act as a buffer for our members in need. 97 countries, highest in our history, have benefited from our lending since the pandemic, the majority through multi-year programs. During the same period, our concessional loans have tripled. Interest in the Resilience and Sustainability Facility continues to grow. We have 20 countries now using the facility to enhance their climate resilience, almost double the number when we met a year ago. And there are many more expressing interest. And I want to mention 3 firsts. In April, for the first time, we reached our precautionary balances target of about $30 billion. This safeguards the fund's financial soundness. We use the strength of our balance sheet to help our borrowing members. In just the past weeks, our membership came together to support 2 historic reforms. For the first time, we reduced our charges and surcharges. The cost of borrowing from our general resources will go down $1.2 billion annually. This is a 36% reduction in surcharges and in the margin of charges. And for the first time, we work with our membership to creatively deploy our net income to bolster the IMF support to low-income countries. A comprehensive reform and financing package generating about $8 billion in additional subsidy resources for PRGT over the next 5 years, more than doubling the long-term self-sustained lending envelope to $3.6 billion a year. This is global cooperation and solidarity in action. And I want to end, as always, using a very good quote to speak to my message today. This time it is Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. As for the future, your task is not just to foresee it, but to enable it. And this is what we are committed to do, enable a peaceful and prosperous future for our members. As you would see, we are ready to take your questions. Julie is all poised to pick up from this group and those online.
Very good. Thank you very much, Kristalina, for those remarks. We'll now turn to your questions. Okay, let's start in the middle. Gentleman in the second row with the dark jacket, white shirt.
Good morning, Kristalina. Daniel Davis, Agence France Presse. Thanks very much for taking my question. I was wondering, you've spoken in the past and today as well of your concern over trade fragmentation and its impact on the global economy. I was wondering, what do you make of the joint declaration adopted by members of the BRICS group of countries in Kazan yesterday, calling for the creation of an independent payment system dubbed the BRICS Bridge? How concerned are you about the fragmentation of the global payment system? Thank you.
The idea of having a payment system of a group of countries is not new. What we need to see is more details. What is it in this idea? How that may translate into reality, and then we would be able to assess it. But more broadly, what I recognize is that we have different members forming different groupings, but all members support the IMF.
Very good. Okay, let's go to this side. I will take the woman in the front in the pink jacket.
Good morning. My name is Rachel, financial journalist at 21st Century Business Herald, Guangdong, China. So my question is that given the global nature of many challenges, you just talked about like high debt and slowing economic growth rate. So how should countries work together to foster future economic growth rate? And also during this process, what role does IMF in facilitating this economic growth? Thank you.
We have ample evidence that when countries cooperate, everybody benefits. We also have ample evidence that when there is a higher uncertainty, the value of cooperation is higher. When the world felt in the terrible hands of the pandemic, we had enormous uncertainty, what is going to happen next, and at that time, cooperation of our members within the IMF, cooperation of members in the G20, it has helped crystallize what are the right policies to take and then synchronize global response. And in that spirit, the IMF continues to do three things for our members to nurture that spirit of cooperation. First, we perform our bilateral surveillance and multilateral surveillance function for the benefit of everyone. So countries can get a second opinion on their economies, but they also can see their trajectory in comparison to others and identify policies that can work. In other words, we are a transmission line of good practices. Two, we are there for countries that may face financial difficulties. As I mentioned, we are at a record high level of lending because of the complexities of problems countries face. I highly recommend to all of you to go and see an art exhibition, art piece of art in, where is it?
It's in the Red Level Gallery.
Red Level Gallery.
In this building.
So go to Red Level Gallery. It's very interesting. A group of students were asked how they can demonstrably present decades of delivery of the fund. And they present our lending by having, for each decade, a column with balls inside. And each ball is 500 million SDRs. And so you look at the columns, the first one, a couple of balls, the next one, some more, and then you go to the last one, and it's actually breathtaking. I looked at it and I said, oh my God, I'm so glad the fund is there, because that financial support is critical for countries. And three, we are an institution that innovates and shares innovations with our members. One innovation is the Resilience and Sustainability Trust, but we have, throughout our history, we have done many, and then we, of course, pass the benefit to our members. Whenever we have these meetings, now, previous meetings, what impresses me is how serious the discussion on the topics of the day is among finance ministers and central bank governors, and I'm very, very proud we host these discussions.
Wonderful. Okay, let's go to the side of the room. I'm going to go all the way to the back. The woman in white in the back on the right there.
Thank you. This is Paula Escalada from Agencia F. Latin America is facing low medium-term growth, which is one of the issues being discussed by the G20 in Brazil. What are your views on the Latin American economy? How can it address this issue? And which are the main challenges for the region apart from this? Thank you.
You're right. Latin America faces a not different from the whole world, by the way. It faces a disappointing growth path. Growth is moderating, and that means that Latin America needs to concentrate on how that growth trajectory can be lifted. We have been discussing the key reforms, growth-enhancing reforms that can be undertaken by countries. I also want to recognize that Latin America is not a unified place, because if you look at the Caribbean or Central America, they're actually doing better. They're doing, their performance is better than global average. And when you look into the reason why they're doing better, well, because they have taken seriously the need to trim down debt. You take a country like Barbados or Jamaica, reforms are bringing results, and because they have taken to heart the significance of governance and engaging the public to pursue reforms. So when I think of Latin America, of the big economies in Latin America, it is time to do the same thing, have the ambition to reform in a pro-growth direction. And what is encouraging is that I hear that countries recognize that.
Okay, very good. Let's go back to the middle. I'm going to take the gentleman in the third row here on the very end.
Thank you. My name is Francis Into with the Ghana News Agency. So while the IMF continues to support economies, the 2024 World Development Report is indicating that 74 out of 108 countries are still trapped in the lower middle income level. What are the significant initiatives that the fund is undertaking to ensure that these countries are uplifted into upper middle income countries, and what will be the impact on the world?
We have seen through history how countries break out of this middle income trap. And it is a combination of four things. Invest in education, in people, in human capital. Invest in Infrastructure these days, digital infrastructure is hugely important. It has to be equitable. Invest in governance, rule of law, transparency and accountability to the public, and cooperate, learn from others, engage with others. And I think this is where countries need to go. We have learned a lot about growth-enhancing reforms. We actually know, we have studied how they succeed. And they actually can lift, our analysis shows that growth-enhancing reforms can lift up growth trajectory significantly, up to, as I mentioned, up to 8%. So it is that determination and engaging the public, creating public support that brings results. I always like to give the example of Jamaica, because Jamaica was a country 10, 12 years ago, was a country with very high debt, a lot of crime. People were kind of desperate for their future. Well, they brought that down by half, and they moved the country in a very positive growth trajectory by that holistic approach to development. Was the question about all countries or?
All kind of low-income countries
yeah.
trying to reach
Yeah.
middle-income status.
So basically, for low-income countries, this is not given that you cannot break out of it, but it does require a comprehensive program of reforms. It does require consistency of implementing these reforms, and it does require bringing public support for it. And what we do at the fund is to work with countries to identify that pathway, country by country, country-specific directions of reforms that can help achieve that result.
Very good. I'm going to go now to this side of the room. I'm going to go to the gentleman in the tan jacket, kind of yes, right there.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ahmed Yaqub. I am the managing editor of Al-Yom Saba newspaper, Egyptian newspaper. My question is about what is the impact of the geopolitical tensions and Gaza conflict on the region, especially or particularly on the neighboring countries. And Egypt is currently implementing the current economic reform program, and amid very difficult regional and international difficulties and very strict circumstances. So the IMF at this point of time is burdening the Egyptian people because of the strict timetable of reforms and decline of the Suez Canal revenues by $6 billion, and uncertainty about the future of the the global economy. So did the Egyptian authorities discuss the review of the current economic reform program with the International Monetary Fund? Thank you.
I started today my comments thinking about the people affected by conflicts, and of course in the Middle East, this is an ever-increasing number of people. Tragedy that is personal, but it is also for the economies in the region. We have seen in the epicenter of the conflict very dramatic contraction in Gaza, West Bank, Lebanon, very significantly impacted. We also have seen some spillover to other economies, and you mentioned Egypt. Egypt is negatively impacted. Egypt is losing 70% of the revenues it used to collect from the Suez Canal because of the impact of the conflict, because of the Houthi attacks, because of the difficulties. MENA as a whole is seeing growth projections revised significantly downward, 0.6% downward revision from April to now. Now we project only 2.1% growth. And a big reason for this downgrade is the conflict. And Egypt is bearing a very significant cost of what is happening in the neighborhood, plus the conflict in Sudan. Egypt is hosting, if I'm not wrong, some 9 million people from the instability in the region. We have been standing firmly with Egypt. We had a program, $3 billion program, because of all these increased pressures on Egypt. We have augmented significantly the program. We increased it by $5 billion. We have been very attentive to what are the right measures. But let me say this, Egypt is better served by undertaking reforms sooner rather than later. In fact, there has been some delay in the past of actions, and that makes the cost higher, and that cost ultimately falls on the shoulders of people. I will